Media. Gary, can you hear me?
I can hear you, Mike. I can't hear anybody else.
Oh, okay. Well,
Can you guys hear me now?
I hear you, Mr. Peterson.
Okay. I was just trying to unmute, but that wasn't what did it. You did it.
All right.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
So, yeah, unmute your...
All right. So, Gary, can you hear me?
I can hear you, Mr. Marcucci.
All right. Great. Welcome to Gary and to Mike. It looks like we're up and running here. This is a request from you, Gary, to appoint Mike Giampetro as part-time alternate inspector of wires.
Yes, sir.
You want to tell us a little bit about Mr. Giampetro, or maybe he'll introduce himself? Either way, however you want to do it.
Yeah, I mean, our current staffing requires a backup for our acting wiring inspector, Bill Cook. In case of his unavailability, we don't have a current backup for Bill right now. Mike Giampetro, we want to make sure that we can meet the needs of the Medfield residents and their contractors, of course. Mike is the building commissioner and the inspector of wires next door in the town of Millis. He's got a long tenured, many years of service, both in the building industry as an electrical contractor, as well as an inspector. He's been a wiring inspector for, I think, 19 years, a building official for over 20. And as I said, he's next door. He's willing and able to help us out on an as-needed basis. So that is my request to the Board of Selectmen, that we appoint Mike as an acting alternate for any time we need him to assist Bill Cook.
Okay. Any questions, comments, Pete?
No, all set. Thank you.
No questions.
Questions? All right. Christine, anything?
No.
Nick, anyone? All right. Mike, you want to say anything, or is that introduction sufficient?
well, that's very sufficient, but just to say thank you, and I'm always willing to help out. Right next door, I'm currently building a new dwelling in Millis, going to be moving there very shortly within the next couple of months. So I'll be readily accessible to help Gary out if he needs anything. And like Gary said, I've been in this construction business, since I was 16, and been in code, electrical. Started off with the electrical code way back when I was in 21 years old, 22 years old. I was the deputy wiring inspector in the town of Milford. And then I just moved from there, got into the building business, started building houses in a little strip mall. I got out of the electrical business itself and just stood with code enforcement. Got into being a building commissioner, and I've been doing that for the past 22 years. So I've always got my head in the code books. Obviously, you can see my resume. Been around for a long time, and more than willing to help out a neighboring town if they need help. I'm readily available. Thank you. Nice to meet you, and hopefully to meet you in person.
Terrific. Thank you very much. We have a motion, Mr. Murby.
I move that we appoint Mike Giampetro as the part-time alternate inspector of wires.
Second.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Murby,
Yes.
and Mr. Marcucci. Oh, you're supposed to do that.
I know,
right? Oh,
but
wow.
that's okay.
Actually, you know what?
You don't need a roll
we don't
call.
even need a roll
You need
call.
a roll
No roll call needed. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? No. It passes. There we go. All
Thank
right.
you.
Thank you very much, Mike. Thank you, Gary.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
All right. Let's return now to our agenda order, starting with COVID-19 status update.
So this will be very brief. As you mentioned, we are transitioning back to our meetings in person. We're working with the Board of Health agent to provide protocols for that transition. We're asking that all of our committees be patient as we make that transition. We've already had some double booking issues since everybody needs to have a physical room. So if everybody can be patient, we will start slotting people in if the legislation does not, if the legislators don't act and go back to Zoom. So,
Great.
that's
Okay.
it.
All right. And obviously, it would still be at the discretion of the committees if they want to meet in person as well.
Correct, and we're probably split 50-50, some that are more than ready to come back, such as yourselves, and some that would like to continue on Zoom if possible. So we'll coordinate with both groups.
Okay. Very good. Yes, Mr. Sorrell.
So this only goes to the meeting of the boards or committees themselves. You're free to allow audience participation via Zoom if that's what committees and boards want to do.
Okay. That is helpful. And under our existing remote participation policy, where if a quorum of the board is meeting in person, people are able to call in.
Correct.
Would that extend to Zoom as well? In other words,
That will
could you
extend
have, okay, so you conceivably,
Remote participation only applies to the board and committee members
Sure.
themselves, not the audience.
but we don't need any action from the legislature if, for example, two of us were here and a third wanted to be on Zoom, we could do it that way.
You can do it that way.
As long as
we
you
have
have,
public access.
you're back to having to have the physical quorum present. But,
Right.
yeah, one of you can be traveling
Okay,
somewhere.
that's good to know.
The only issue with our policy on that is there is a cap at the number of meetings that you can do remote participation. So we may want to
Okay.
revisit that
Okay.
if we need to.
All right, well, we'll see what the legislature comes up with and then take a look at that. So, all right, the next item is to discuss the town of Medfield's financial policies, a copy of which is in the meeting packet. Just a preface from me on this, we adopted these 3 years ago now. I think they've worked reasonably well. I think the warrant committee has done a great job in making them effective and putting them into practice. I think in the course of that experience, there are a couple of things that are not addressed in the policy that we need to address. One of the ones that we kind of realized this probably in the first budget cycle when the warrant committee was attempting to measure compliance with the policy, because our first budget cycle under the policy was actually a normal pre-COVID budget cycle. And when the warrant committee was attempting to measure compliance with the policy doesn't say how to measure compliance with it and the timing at which you measure compliance. And the biggest issue with that is the gap between the date of town meeting and the certification of free cash, and whether you're measuring this as of the date of town meeting, whether you're measuring it as of the date of the certification of free cash, which is 6 to 8 months afterwards, or at some other time. And I think what the warrant committee has roughly settled on as a test is to measure it as of the date of the certification of free cash
Correct.
and attempt to project what those numbers will be when doing the budget at town meeting. And so I think we ought to formalize in the policy itself how it's tested. And I think as came up at town meeting this year, we ought to formalize that the test should be published in the warrant report so that people can see the math that's used for the test. I think there's a little bit of a definitional question in the policies as to exactly what is our operating budget and how that works, and so what the numerator is. And again, the warrant committee has adopted an interpretation of the policy that I would propose that we codify in the policy itself. There's a little bit of cleanup in here. I think this was originally drafted to have a larger role for the school committee than the school committee wanted to have, and so we've got to take out that reference in the policy. And then finally, the other thing I was suggesting, and then I'll open it up to both of you for comment and other suggestions, is that to add as an exhibit to the policies any of our bond covenants and our existing bonds that would be implicated by the policy. So if we have covenants in our existing bonds or in future bonds that are issued that require us to maintain a certain level of cash or have certain requirements for our budget or otherwise, that we have those bond covenants in one place, so that people in the town can understand what those rules are, and that we in the warrant committee, when putting the budgets together, can understand what external constraints we may have in addition to the policy. And ideally, the policies will, to the extent there are any bond covenants implicated by them, the policies of themselves should require compliance with our existing bond covenants, but I think it would be useful to have that included as a reference point as well. And a few months ago, I'd asked Georgia to pull that together, and she said she'd do so after town meeting. So that's my intro on the policies, and I'll throw it out to both of you for any additional comments or things we ought to look at. Pete?
I think there, in the language, there's just some dated language that should get cleared up as well. Also, I think that as a matter of going forward, we need to have some repository for all these policies. In the past, we've had some policies, and I just don't think they've been put somewhere, and I don't know if we have a policy section now where we're keeping all of these. Okay, good.
Yep.
Excellent.
I know they're all on the website.
They're all on the
but I
website,
don't know if we
yep.
have a manual or a book.
Yeah, well, we should have some sort of maybe itemization of them, or we should keep track of them, I guess, is my point. And that's it. I think I mean, this is the sort of stuff that we should be doing, having these sorts of policies and procedures. So this is excellent that we've done it.
I actually had questions about a couple things you said,
Sure.
just to make sure I understood them. Going back to the testing, if I heard you're saying that the warrant committee will make a projection of what they think the certified free cash will be, and they'll use that to test compliance with the policy at the time of the town meeting.
Correct.
Did I follow that right?
That's right.
So the test is actually the warrant committee's, the test uses an informed projection by the warrant committee of what the free cash will be, but the test itself occurs just prior to the town meeting.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, I mean, I guess it occurs, yeah, that's right. There's a test for purposes of the budget. So for the warrant committee to say that, just like they make projections about local revenue,
Right.
they'll make projections about this to recommend a budget that in their estimation complies with the policies.
Right.
Then I think the official test is in December or January when it's actually certified, and you look at what that is to see if in fact it turns out that we're in compliance with it.
So I'm going to suggest that, but from a policy standpoint, I think the test is prior to the town meeting, which says if we're going to be explicit about the methodology, then we need to think about why we have this policy and at what point in the cycle the policy comes into play in terms of influencing our decisions. That's going to be on approval of the budget itself. It'll be interesting if the warrant committee makes a projection of what the certified free cash is, and 5 years in a row they drastically overestimate free cash by 50%, then we know we have a problem. But the actual test, and if we want to get the methodology nailed down, that's a test that has to be done going into the town meeting, because that's basically what specifies the budget.
That's right. And I think this does hit upon one of a difference of opinion that I've had from time to time with members of the warrant committee on this, because at least for some of the years when they've done the test, they've anticipated free cash. So in other words, they've anticipated based on where the budget was, there'd be a certain amount of turnbacks, there'd be a certain amount of that, and sort of projected ahead inputs to free cash. My own view is that we shouldn't project it, right? In other words, we should take that out, and just measure what it would be on a simple basis, compliance with what the current free cash is minus the free cash expenditure, and it's got to comply without anticipating any additional turnbacks. That's my personal view. I respect the warrant committee's approach to it as well, which is also an effort to be realistic about it, and so I don't feel strongly one way or the other. My preference would be to say we'll assume no additional turnbacks when we test the free cash portion of it. But for the reserves, for the reserve portions of it, you include the recommended contributions to those reserve accounts that are being included in the budget. And so if the stabilization is $3 million as of the January certification, and you're recommending $500,000 be added to stabilization in the budget, then the number for stabilization used for the test is $3.5 million. The question is, if free cash is, according to that January certification, $3 million, and you're proposing to, let's say, just transfer that same $500,000 from free cash to stabilization, Do you use 2.5 million as the free cash number? Or do you look at where you are at that point in the budget year and say, well, we can reasonably estimate we're going to have at least $400,000 in additional free cash, so you use 2.9 million? I think the warrant committee approach, which is a perfectly reasonable approach, is to make, I think, a conservative estimate of what they expect for future free cash. And so they would say, if conservatively we're pretty confident we're going to have at least $400,000 coming in, we'll add that to the free cash balance for purposes of the test. So it's
So in this past year.
We did not do that in this past year.
Well, I know, but
Yeah.
it was also in this past year, we knew that there would be a significant, it's a one-time bump, but we knew there was going to be a significant jump in free cash.
So that was certified last November before we went to town meeting. So we knew what that number was going into town meeting and what we had to spend at town meeting.
so this year when they tested, they didn't project any additional.
We did not project
yeah.
anything.
Just
We
be-
had some
So you used
discussions
the
about it, but we did
So
not.
you used the previously certified number,
Yep,
and we built it from there.
correct. So we took that 3.3 million, and then we did what we spent out of that free cash at town meeting, and that's what we used for our balance for the test.
Was it easier to do that because our free cash certification last November was much higher than it normally is?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And I think
Yes.
it's also the case that I don't think you're anticipating, at least to this point,
No.
a free cash bonanza for next year.
No.
As well. Mr. Sorrell.
Just for information for the residents, the taxpayers, it's extremely confusing to people that you're actually, in a sense, talking apples and oranges, because you've got, really, you're going to town meeting for the next year's budget, and you've got certified free cash, but it's for the current year, which then, as of July 1, as we all know, ceases to exist until it's recertified again. And it may be within the range, but not necessarily, because it's all recalculated. So people need to understand how that works and, what set of numbers you're working off of. I mean, a lot of communities will take and clean out the free cash from the current year, put it into stabilization or capital purchases or whatever, and then wait to see what they get the following year after July 1 to build up again.
Yeah, I mean, I think we want to keep some amount in free cash as a general.
But it's just the explanation
Yeah,
part of it that
right.
I'm pointing
No,
out.
that's right. But in general, unless something unusual happens, unless you spend it, at least the amount that was there previously and then unspent will come back,
It should.
typically.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's what I said, if something unusual happens, but under normal circumstances, if you have $3 million in free cash and you don't spend any free cash, you should have at least $3 million in free cash the next year. So, I don't know, thoughts on the test? Which way to go with the test?
I'm ambivalent. There's a piece of me that says, yeah, do it conservatively, lock into the past year. And if that's conservative, and if you're planning less than what ultimately might be there, the conservative financial manager in me says so much the better, and you always have another year that you can take advantage of the windfall. On the other hand, only because our budgeting routinely uses Prop 2.5 limit as our virtual target. We have other towns that have plenty of extra buffer in their Prop 2.5 limit, so they don't use that limit. Given that when we use that calculation to determine whether or not we're compliant with Prop 2.5, if we're using a conservative free cash estimate, we are going to be more likely to put ourselves into a position of needing to have a Prop 2.5 operating override, even if we had good reason to believe the free cash in the coming year was going to be significantly higher than what our certified free cash is. So, like I said, I'm ambivalent. I haven't got a position yet, but I'm playing this out and saying, well, do it conservatively, then we deliberately are making it more likely we'll need Prop 2.5 overrides, or that we'll not allow ourselves to have Prop 2.5 overrides, which is my preference. But given the way we typically budget, which is to come up as close to the Prop 2.5 ceiling as we do, I'm trying to understand whether that's unnecessary self-inflicted pain or whether that's just fiscally conservative policy. That's where I'm wrestling.
I mean, I guess my reaction to that, it's a good point. I guess my reaction is that given the amount of free cash we have, it doesn't make a huge difference in whether we have an override or not, because I don't think we'd be in a position where we'd be able to spend under any iteration of the test or any formulation of the test $2 million in free cash to avoid an override. So I think it would be at the narrow margin where we would be able to, because I think we had a very unusual year last year, that we had a huge, a very atypical amount of free cash for a number of reasons. And even there, that only got us kind of barely into compliance with where we are. So, I mean, I think given all the other needs we have, I don't think that we're close to being in a position to use enough free cash for operations that you're meaningfully affecting whether you're going to have an override or not. So we're not going to do an override for $250,000, and though that, or even $500,000, most likely. So I don't know. I guess I would see that as a secondary concern, just where we are financially at the moment, and so that's why I prefer sort of the more conservative approach, which essentially guarantees that you'll always pass the test, right? So there's no risk. If you're not counting on any additional turnbacks, you're compliant with the test with no new free cash. And so then when it's actually tested, and if you have a ratings agency or an auditor that looks at your policies and looks at your compliance, I suspect they're not going to look at the town meeting projection. They're going to look at the actual audited financial statements and the actual certified free cash to see whether you're in compliance with it. And it does essentially guarantee that you'll be in compliance, because you're not anticipating anything.
So let me get to my second question, which ties into the answer you just gave me to the first question. You had mentioned that the school, I recognize that this was written and the school committee never signed on to this.
Right.
And now we're saying that the school committee does not. What is it that the school committee doesn't want to do?
I think just they do not want to be involved in the votes on the overall budgets of departments other than their own that is
Correct.
Contemplated in this.
So that means they will recognize they'll recognize the policy. They will take actions to comply with that policy where necessary. I guess what I'm really asking is, so who is it that tells the school committee what their budget needs to be?
Well, that would be the warrant committee. So,
Okay.
I think it's the warrant committee.
So
Yeah,
the
the
warrant
warrant-
committee is committed to this.
The warrant committee is committed to this, and they have used these policies in each of the last 3 budget cycles and attempted to enforce compliance with it. We obviously we did not fully comply, particularly with the schedule for the capital budget, given the extremely unusual circumstances we've had. And one of my goals, and one of my proposed goals for the town administrator for this year, is going to be putting us on that capital budget cycle as contemplated by the policy. But otherwise, the warrant committee has enforced compliance with these policies and has endeavored to build a budget that complies with the policies.
I will make the observation that the warrant committee, in doing that this year, and I'm not actually criticizing them for doing it because I haven't heard screams of outrage from Christine, but the way they did that was to allow an increase in the school budget and to drive town budgets backwards by 2 fiscal years. So yes, I'm comfortable with the warrant committee being the custodian of this, but I will make the observation that the way we did that here, and this is what I'm particularly concerned about, because 3/4 of the discretionary portion of the operating budget falls on the schools. 1/4 falls on the town. And we either need to make hard decisions about what town services we actually are intending to do, or I don't see that as a long-term way of balancing the budget. So not trying to revisit 2 years ago.
Right.
But that assurance that this is a good process that the warrant committee will be able to follow.
Right.
I'm registering my concern
Right.
that method that we used at a time that I understand it was a crisis, and we made a deliberate decision that the thing that we wanted to hurt the least was the schools. I don't disagree with that. But almost every year there's a budget crisis. When I react to the 100,000 or 200,000 that we don't want to go for an override on, I'm concerned where that $100,000 or $200,000 cut will fall.
Right. No, I understand that. I think in defense of the school committee on this point, I mean, this policy doesn't really deal with operating budgets. Obviously, it affects operating budgets, but it doesn't really deal with operating budgets. And so I understand their position that since we are technically the stewards and the owners of most of the capital assets in town and overall stewards of the finances, it's more appropriate to have it be a policy of ours. But obviously, and I think that the line that the warrant committee is drawing on the respect to these policies is that we're going to end the practice of papering over some of those operational budgets with dipping further into reserves or long-term expenses, and hopefully also ending the practice of cutting back on long-term capital expenses to avoid short-term operating
Yeah,
costs.
I'm in agreement
So
with that.
I think
All right.
that's the piece of it where
Okay.
where they come into it. But I understand what you're saying on the operating side. So anything else?
Yeah.
All right. So I think we have, Christine or Nick, anything else that you think we ought to be including?
We have a couple of things. Nick and I went over it today. There's some language changes that you mentioned. We refer to the Capital Stabilization Fund, but we actually really mean the Municipal Building Stabilization Fund. So we're going to go through all of that.
Okay.
I would say if you give us at least, 4 to 6 weeks, let us make the changes. We'll run a couple of different tests for you, how it would look.
Okay.
And then because we are obviously going to have our call with Moody's this summer, so we'd like to have this done.
Right.
After we finish with that, we'll pick this up and then we'll present a draft to you,
Okay.
hopefully in mid-August.
Okay, great. And I think the one other thing too is we have to add a reference to the new actual capital stabilization.
The new Capital Stabilization
Actual-
Fund,
right.
and there should be some questions about some of the reserve funds that we have, whether or not they should be included in this test, and we'll run all those numbers for you and
Okay.
provide that.
And do you have, for redlining purposes, do you have the Word copy of this?
I do.
Okay,
Yes.
all right. Very good, all right. Well, we have a Q&A question. Question from Chris Potts. How do we know the stance of the school committee has not discussed it? I think we know the stance because when this was discussed 3 years ago, they
It was in
didn't.
2018.
2018, they didn't sign on to it at that point. So I think that's how we know that. Answer live. Look at that. Oh, look at that. I answered it live. There we go. All right. All right. Next item, town administrator goals for fiscal year 2022, July 1st, 2021 to June 30th, 2022. In the town administrator's new contract, there is a discretionary bonus piece that is tied to the achievement of goals that we are to establish for the year. And so this is probably a 2-meeting discussion, but I thought we should kick it off and come up with a set of goals for the town administrator. My personal target would be 10 of them, but I'm open to a different number, and then we'll just have to figure out how to tie a different number of goals to the discretionary compensation piece.
10 big ones or 10 little?
With how many subparts? It's like you're limited to 10 goals with a minimum of 4 subparts per goal. We can get enough goals that it'd be worth like $1.50 per goal on each of them. All right, Pete, do you have goal suggestions?
The thing that I was going to suggest was that that the select board get regular updates from departments like the police, the fire, DPW. That I know that I've been interested in the past in getting updates from the police department, and I really haven't seen them. I'd like to know a little bit more about the detail of what is going on in the administration of the department. Same with the fire department. I know that when Mo started at the DPW, we got a spreadsheet right away, but I think we only got one more of those. It was very helpful to have that type of flow of information from the departments. So I'm hoping that our town administrator can facilitate that flow.
All right. And in what format would you have that be? And what time period? How regular?
Monthly, quarterly, I don't want to impose a much of a burden on the department heads, but I'm assuming that they have a lot of this material already, that it would just be pretty easy to put together. So that maybe some documents that they already are collecting for other reasons. But I don't know enough about running a police department, fire department, or DPW to know, but I'm hoping that Christine can work that out with them and figure that out and get us information to keep us informed.
All right. Anything else?
No, that was the main thing for me.
All right.
I think that the budget stuff, I think, has worked out great, so.
Okay. Gus.
as I was thinking about this, the first reaction I had was, well, a year ago, would we have been smart enough to know what goals to give Christine? And so there was a piece of me that said, actually, in terms of performance, it was the reactions, the ability to take unforeseen circumstances and get out in front of them very quickly. That is probably what I have valued most in terms of the performance over the past year. So I always look at goals as being kind of this 10% increment that, and it's not like, oh, these are just the 10 things you need to do. It's like, okay, these are the 10% incremental changes without necessarily suggesting that some of the most important things that were going on shouldn't go away. So my first thought is I would actually like Christine to give us her draft. Doesn't have to be 10, but I'd actually like to know what your thoughts are about what your goals should be, or in the spirit of incremental new things that you want to push. I'd actually like to know what they are. Not the routine stuff, just the incremental changes. Having said that, I went through and I was not precise in the goals. These were just broad areas. I still think we have room to make the town website more user-friendly, more intuitive, and probably cleaner in the sense Christine, you and I have talked about this. We have committees that you have to slog through that haven't met since 2017 that are on the prime screen. It's fine to archive them, but we ought to have like the true vibrant part of the town is what people see when they get on the website. Second one, this is a pet peeve of mine, and I'm disappointed that it didn't already get addressed through the townwide master planning, because it was the one thing I added to the charter, which is we don't have a plan for how we maintain our open space. We acquire open space, and then we let it sit there, and then basically, I'm saying this like 3 days after DPW went and mowed the walk, that public access next to the MNOT's field. So ours is now mowed, but it was basically a jungle that was impassable. And the point is, who needs to do what? Who needs to take care of the town property? I think is still sort of an open debate between Parks and Rec and DPW, and it just, I'm just, for our own good, we should have coherence there. I don't have an answer on who's supposed to do it, but we need coherence. And if we think open space is important, and if it's for something other than merely locking up for the wildlife, that we actually want people to be able to take advantage of the open space, then we need some sort of a plan for maintaining that open space to keep it accessible.
So can I ask a question about that one? Because I thought that we were planning, that was in the process already, I thought.
So that was one of the goals we discussed in 2019, was creating a building and grounds and determining the best way to handle all of that property. And then COVID hit and we were not able to work on that at all. But that is on my draft list.
It's probably a two-tier question, because there's who's going to take care of the town's building and grounds. And then there's this other thing, which is the open space. And the answers for those two are probably not the same.
Everyone remembers the public safety weeding incident of 2019, so, yes.
So that was the next one. I'm not sure that this is a goal for you, Christine. It's something I think we have to talk about, but Mark, you're here. I think it even ties in with you, but it's the oversight of town property that's been assigned to town departments. And so the issue is, various town departments have property which has been given to them to carry out their mission. This is, I think, the care and control issue that you've referred to. And yet we actually have right now policy violations that still exist on town property that are in direct violation of the policy we passed here. And I assume a piece of that is because it's still under the care and custody of a town department that's not inclined or not prepared to bring that into alignment with our policy. So if we have people that are running on an open loop in that way, doing things that are not part of their prime mission, I think we ought to try to find a way to get around that. I'm not sure that's a goal for you, Christine, so much as it's an issue for us, but that one popped out as problematic.
Gus, what's an example of that?
The little inclusive library right next to the FAST Center. We basically said that we wouldn't have libraries like that on town property. It's there.
Okay.
It's not going on. And I don't bring that up because I'm going after the people that sponsor it. I'm bringing it up because our policy is we don't have political type things being allowed on town property. The gazebo, the Baxter Park, we've done that in terms of like the suicide prevention. So it's not like, we've even done it for that matter for some of we did it at the Pocket Park for suicide prevention. So I'm not kind of just suggesting a draconian nothing anywhere, anytime, but that's basically on town property and it shouldn't be there, based on our policy.
And related to that, Gus, and this may be something for us as well, related to other departments with care, custody, and control of land, I think it would be helpful, this is probably for us in conjunction with Mark and Christine, to formulate a policy on that and how land is transferred to departments for their care, custody, and control, how much of it, for what purpose.
Yeah.
Because I don't, as we learned through recent events, there's probably more land than necessary has been assigned to various departments, and once it is, there's complications to putting it to some other use. So we may want to formalize.
Yeah, that's like I said, I don't know that it's automatically
Yeah.
Christine's
Just to
goal.
kind of go back to what you said a minute ago, the open space is actually all under conservation because it was acquired for conservation purposes. So by statutory definition, they have care, custody, and control of all, a heck of a lot of land in terms of acreage.
And that would be fine. I'm not implying it has to be DPW or Parks and Rec that does open space. I'm saying that we, as a town, we get the stuff and then we let it just sit there and become overgrown. So it may be.
It was an issue with use, particularly the town gardens, developing them up on Plain Street. That was an issue when that happened. It's also an issue which you're alluding to, kind of, it's maintenance. Open space, particularly fields and meadows, do not stay fields and meadows unless you maintain them.
Yeah, there's that too, yeah. So you're right, there's access issues, and then there's actually environmental stewardship issues.
Yes.
So you're right, it's actually both of those. And I wouldn't expect the Conservation Commission members to be out there on Saturdays with grub hose and you know, it's an issue that we have that we basically ignore, even as we say we want to acquire more open space. Right.
Well, and as a town budgetary issue, we ignore it too, because we don't budget to take
Right.
care of the town properties.
Yeah,
So.
I'm not saying who needs to do it, I'm just saying nobody does. Well, right now, my walkway, the DPW, 2 or 3 times over the summer will come and take care of that. But
I'm
that's,
fascinated to hear you say that, because I saw the other, what I'm assuming is the other end of the mower coming out on Hospital Road,
yeah.
and I wondered why is
Yeah,
that road into the backfield
The guy was there.
mowed, and it was probably to get over to.
He was there for a couple of hours and he did a very good job. Last year, there was a path down the middle and then everything was still on either side. This time, it's right up to the fence that's been taken out, which this is a bad tick year. You know, there's a whole lot of reasons why you don't need 3-foot grass on the walkway going into the public areas. Yes.
Mr. You still need the microphone, Bill. Come on, I know you're out of practice, but you still need the microphone. And then you'll have to identify yourself.
Bill Massaro, Evergreen Way. I just have a question about the open space and responsibility for maintenance and what have you. I mean, I know that the Concom spends quite amount of time every so many years putting together their open space report. I'm kind of curious as to whether the other departments actually look at that, sit there and say, I mean, what you need is somebody to look at the report that identifies every piece of open space, what the plans for it were, and then what department is necessary to keep it in the condition that it's in or to bring it to the aspirational goals or whatever that the Conservation Commission is putting out. And so I think you could say that for almost everything in the town. You know, one of the things I noticed when I was attending all of the meetings that were even remotely related to the hospital was that the departments don't talk to one another about topics. And you would have something come before the Board of Selectmen where another committee had, without rejecting it, had made unfavorable comments about certain elements of what was being proposed. And when it came to you and you asked a specific question of the person who was making the proposal, what did the XYZ Commission say about it? They said, oh, they loved it. So I don't see anything making this go away without a conscious effort to make the departments talk to one another. Now, maybe your monthly reports or quarterly reports or whatever, when you're identifying what are the issues, what are the significant problems, what are the accomplishments, everything else, that this gets published to all of the departments so that the other departments see so that Concom, who says something about a land issue or a field overgrown issue, whatever, that DPW sees that this is a problem for Concom and that you guys are aware of it.
So, Bill, that's one of the reasons why we changed the land use department to put Sarah head of land use, so she now oversees conservation, so that ties in with the planning board and conservation. We've been remiss the last few months getting ready for town meeting, but we'll go back now in person with donuts to our monthly department head meetings to get everybody in the same room. And that was a huge change that I put in about when I took over 2.5 years ago, 3 years ago, that really made a big difference in people talking to each other and knowing what each department was going to do. But I think one of the things we're going to have to do is we're going to have to budget some money for a building and grounds department and formalize exactly how everything will be taken care of.
Yeah, I don't think this is a matter of giving Christine a bigger whip. It's kind of, it's
I need
a
money.
matter of, yeah. So, but my point is, if we still embrace the idea of acquiring even more open space, I'm saying before you start acquiring more open space, demonstrate your ability to manage what you have. And right now, we haven't done that.
I think we need to take the same approach that we took when we did the 20-year capital plan for our buildings, and we're trying to put the capital stabilization in the 5-year capital plan. It's the same approach we need to take to our open space and building and grounds.
And I wouldn't even rule out, there may be people in town, my model is, you all know the Appalachian Mountain Club, but up in northern New Hampshire, west of Gorham, there's the Randolph Mountain Club. And that's a little tiny town of Randolph on the north side of Mount Washington, and they take care of the trails, primarily there's a bunch of trails that go up Mount Madison. So it's not even necessarily that let's just dump on a town department. There may be people here in town who care enough about this stuff that if there was an organization and maybe if the town put in some efforts to make it clear to people what all the resources in town really are, that it might even be something that there at least would be partially supported by just volunteers who want the outdoor trails and want the outdoor recreation and like being there. So I'm not automatically just dumping it onto a town department if the interest is out there to play a role.
My only comment is
one of these days we will finally run short of Eagle Scout projects as well. So maybe we might require them an annual Eagle Scout project for a couple of these.
we have a tradition to maintain. We have to keep our Eagle Scout production going. I mean, it's fantastic. I've never seen a town like it. I mean, it's wonderful. But I guess, how do you avoid situations on other properties similar to what you had on the church property over here? Who cuts the grass? How much is the church's land? How much is the town's land? I've listened to issues on cutting the grass at the cemeteries and who does this. And so, I mean, you just need to direct some effort towards how you, and it doesn't have to be the #1 priority. I'm certainly not saying it's the only issue we had in town, Christine. Your plate is more than full. But I'm encouraged to hear that we're trying to get the departments to talk to one another. I came from an organization, 10,000 people. There were several departments, sometimes competing with one another, sometimes taking pot shots at one another, and we did weekly reports. I mean, I would never impose that on any organization if I had any say about it and everything else, because you spent more time. Starting on Wednesday, you started putting the Friday report together. You didn't get anything done the rest of the week. But the other departments have to know what the significant issues are in Department A that they may have some peripheral or immediate impact on, or need to be cognizant of it and might have to take action. You need something else. Granted, Sarah, a great person probably to oversee it and to enforce cooperation between the departments and everything else, but you got to establish it. I mean, it's...
There's that kind of an example for me, Bill. The thing I'm thinking of is before the Redgate Farm acquisition came up, I've been active in Boy Scouts for the better part of the last 20 years. I had absolutely no idea that the town owned property called the Scoutland that was embedded behind all the people that live along Phillips and Elm. And when I discovered that, I said, well, that's interesting. Well, how do you get to that? And the answer was, oh, there's a trail on the Walpole border. That's how you get, the only way you could get into this huge piece of
A
town-owned
narrow
property
trail.
was one trail. So I drove all the way to the Walpole border, and I got out of my car, and I looked at this basic virtual wall of jungle vines. And so, yes, okay, you know, does the town cut the grass around Meeting House Pond? That's kind of, you know, that's the domestic side of this. I'm talking about the open space outdoor recreation side.
But if you can't resolve that, how do you resolve these other?
Well,
I mean, there's actually more to it than that. There's the maintenance, but there's also, just like with other aspects of your facility, there's certain infrastructure that needs major repairs. I mean, for instance, a few years ago when they went through the process of dredging Meeting House Pond, and that was a major effort. And there's other parts of town land that are eligible for those types of projects as well.
We had a pond budget for a while, but then the budgets got tight and we don't take care of our ponds now. I mean, the other issue that I've been aware of is that because of having a wildlife management committee, my brother-in-law Frank Perry walks around in the woods all the time because he's interested in the woods. And as a result of having that committee, we found all kinds of illegal hunting stands in the woods, so that our actual effort to promote a hunting program in town actually discovered that we actually had a lot of illegal hunting going on in town. Recently, Frank found someone had been cutting trails on the Holmquist land to do bicycle jumps and things. So, I mean, we need to, it's good to have people checking our land too, because we don't always check it. It's an issue. I know there's a trailhead, Gus, on Boyden, I think it is, that goes to Rocky Woods. The last time I looked at it years ago, the neighbor had a bush that basically covered the whole trailhead. It was.
We had at least one occasion I can recall where somebody installed a fence obstructing the trail, and we had to send a cease and desist letter. The developer had granted a trail to the town as part of the subdivision.
Yeah, I think it would be very good for the town to mark all of these trails. I mean, if you go up and there's a trail up at Jade Walk, you basically are walking on lawn between two homes. It's very uncomfortable to do unless you know for sure where the trailhead is, and it'd be nice to have a good marker there so that people would feel comfortable walking through what is basically a side yard, because it is a trail, it's a town trail.
Sounds like another Eagle Scout project. Gus, any other goals?
just one other area, I'll call it an area, Christine, and I would look more toward your guidance on whether this merits being a goal, but I put it down as regional collaboration, but we've had a couple of informal discussions about, I don't even need to be regional, it could be two towns, whether there's opportunities for us to collaborate. If it looks like there's potential to do that, and it's near enough term where it would make sense to make that a goal, that would be the other area that I was thinking of.
You know, that's actually on my draft
Okay.
list too,
Okay.
to be considered, so.
That's it.
All right. And the one that I had, these are good ones, Pete and Gus. One that I had was the capital budget and meeting the schedule for the capital budget for this year was the main one that I had, meeting that October deadline for completion of the capital budgeting process. Do you want to share? Do you have copies for us of yours, or do you want to share it after?
I'll share it after. Why don't I take,
Okay.
because some of the goals are similar to what you've said, so why don't I take what you said tonight, I'll put it in one document, and then we can discuss it on the 29th.
Okay, very good. All right. All right, next item is federal funds update and discussion of CARES, FEMA, and the American Rescue Plan Act. We're going to authorize the town administrator to request payment of our first allocation. Let's start with that. So is there an update before we get to the specific items, or can we get right to the specific
No,
items?
we can get right to the.
All right, the first one is to authorize the town administrator to request payment of Medfield's first allocation of the Coronavirus Local Fiscal Recovery Fund, the American Rescue Plan Act.
So when we did receive the CARES funding, it came directly from the Commonwealth. Because this is coming from the federal government, you actually have to authorize me to request the money from the state, and they have till the end of June to give it to us. They sent us a friendly reminder today that they are looking for that authorization. So we actually have all the paperwork ready to go, and we'll do that this evening.
Okay. Any questions? Anyone not want the money?
Yeah. We will get two. We're getting the first one, within the next few weeks, and then the second one is within 12 months, so.
Okay, great. Do we have a motion?
I move that we authorize the town administrator to request payment of Medfield's first allocation of the coronavirus local fiscal recovery fund from the American Rescue Plan Act.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? No, it passes. All right. Next, to discuss Norfolk County's receipt of American Rescue Plan Act funding for municipalities in Norfolk County. Had a nice letter from the Norfolk County Commissioners here.
We did. So I've been talking at the last few meetings that I was concerned that we hadn't seen any action from the county on this. And while we haven't seen any action, they did send a letter saying that their intention has always been to turn the money over to us. It's determining how.
Hundreds of money.
Yes.
They were
how
keeping, they
will
were
do that.
keeping some.
Yeah, they would like to keep some. And it's my understanding they're negotiating with the state whether or not they're going to turn the money over to the Commonwealth, and then the Commonwealth will distribute it. Or if they're going to keep it themselves, which is about 50 times their actual budget, and they will need to bring in an auditing firm and staff to manage that money. So as you can imagine, a lot of the town administrators in Norfolk County have had lots of suggestions as to how quickly they turn that money over. But I think we're okay not sending the letter yet, but
Okay.
I do think that when we talk in a few minutes about a spending plan, it is very helpful to know the timeline for when that is coming, so you can determine if you're spending 1.3, if you're spending the additional 2.5.
Christine, that spreadsheet that came with the materials, at first, before I saw the letter from the county, I was sitting there saying, how come all the towns that I know something about were zeroed out? And then I realized, oh, it's Norfolk County that doesn't, it was one of the, apparently the other county's been able to figure this one out sooner rather than later. Is any part of the county's delay due to the county trying to figure out what their methodology for breaking that apart and distributing it is? Or is it, like, I know there's that per capita thing,
Right.
which almost made it look like outside of what the county may hold back, there's a per
There's-
capita
yeah, there's a
kind of
prescription
thing.
for it,
So
how we
there's
get it.
not discretion?
No.
Okay.
No.
All right.
The discretion for them is if any of the projects that they would like to do would be eligible for this funding. They do have some county courthouse projects they've discussed. The Aggie School needs some updates, so they're discussing whether or not those would be eligible under this,
Got it.
which I
That's
think is reasonable.
That's
So
reasonable.
Norfolk County is more robust than a number of the other counties that were essentially taken apart years ago. Courts were turned over to the state in other counties, other facilities, so there's more to Norfolk County in comparison to
Yeah.
some other counties in the Commonwealth.
I mean, the examples they gave of what they needed didn't sound unreasonable.
That being said,
Right.
Okay.
All right.
I think we can hold on sending an official letter now, but we're going to still urge them to make a decision sooner rather than later on how to distribute that money.
Got it. All right, now we'll discuss expenditures of the town of Medfield's allocation of the American Rescue Plan Act and a vote to approve American Rescue Plan Act expenses. These were items included in this year's budget pending eligibility. I think, Christine, we
Correct.
didn't have the regulations at the time of town meeting, and so the budget didn't anticipate, didn't count on using these funds. But, well, part of it did, but mostly didn't count on using it. But these are the eligible amounts, so $388,000 for the capital plan, $209,393 for the operating budget, $37,500 for half of the public health nurse's salary, and $110,000 for the one-time COVID stipends.
So just to give you an update on a couple of these, at town meeting, we had stated that we would take the one-time COVID stipends out of fiscal year 21 available funds because we did not have the full ARPA guidance on this, and we can pay those one-time stipends out of this fund, which in turn will help us in our fiscal year 21 free cash. So we were very excited to get the guidance on that. We are still working, I would still like approval on all four of these items tonight, but we are still working with DOR on using the 209 to balance the operating budget, whether or not that will be allowed, because for municipal finance rules, they had some concerns about it. So we're still just working through that with them. So other than that, everything else is ready to go for that.
The only question I had for this year, and I guess going forward it may change. I mean, obviously the salary for the public health nurse is eligible throughout this, right? And these funds are usable for 3 years.
So it's interesting. So we can fund the public health nurse based on COVID. But what you're saying is 50% of their time will be spent on COVID-related issues, which I think is foreseeable. There's still contact tracing to do. There's still, going back to school in the fall. However, under the loss of revenue, which we are still finalizing, you would be able to fund that completely. So I think if it's your desire, you can fund that entire public health nurse amount, which is $75,000.
Yeah. I mean, I don't have I think loss of revenue would apply to anything.
Correct.
Right. So I don't know that it has to be, if it's under I think the COVID allocation 50-50 makes sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
Probably more than 50 this year, probably less than 50 in the future. But if it's just under loss of revenue for the rest, loss of revenue is loss of revenue. So
Right.
it doesn't matter what it goes to.
Just, whatever, it's just what category you're allocating it to.
Pete, any questions or comments?
No.
Gus?
I'm sure this is a dumb question, but I'm going to have to ask it anyway. So the first item, we authorize you to request payment for the first allocation from ARPA.
Mm-hmm.
Is
Which
this the payment that you will be requesting?
No, what they do is we're getting 50% in the first payment and 50% in the second payment. So what I'm asking you to approve tonight is more than that first payment, but we
Okay.
are allowed to deficit spend until that money comes
Okay.
in, similar
And-
to how we did for
And
CARES.
so at this point, we would be approving all of these, but you're still in discussions about whether the allocation here for the operating budget
On
is
the
going to
209,
work.
yeah.
So if that doesn't happen,
Mm-hmm.
then would we redeploy that to other things? So the numbers are going to be the numbers, it's just a question of what we attribute them to.
Correct.
Okay, maybe that wasn't as dumb a question. as I
No.
thought.
No.
Okay, all right.
And these are the four that we indicated we spent at town meeting.
Right.
Okay,
All right. I have no further questions. Do you have a motion?
sure. I move that we approve the expenditures of the town of Medfield's allocation of the American Rescue Plan Act in accordance with the allocated 4 categories in our meeting minutes, $388,000 for the capital plan, $209,393 as an amount to balance the operating budget, $37,500 to go toward paying for public health nurse, and $110,000 to cover the one-time COVID stipend payments.
I'll second that.
I just suggest meeting agenda as opposed to minutes.
Oh, yeah, did I say it minutes? I meant agenda, and then I decided to read them all out anyway, so I stand corrected. It was the meeting agenda, not the minutes, in accordance with the amounts that I just described.
I'll second it again.
All in favor?
Aye.
Yep.
Opposed? All right. And then there were just a couple of other items in this category that they're not listed on here directly, but I wanted to just put on the table as we go down the road, and particularly if the Norfolk County money comes through, in looking at the different categories of available expenditures under the ARPA. And basically in 2 general categories, one related to housing, because one of the categories is to try to alleviate some of the burden that has fallen obviously unevenly on people through this process. And so one thing I'd at least like us to talk about and consider is whether we would create a rent relief fund for people in town who are having difficulty making rent as a result of both of the the combo, the double whammy of rent increases and the challenges of COVID to the economy, which has fallen particularly hard on people who are renters. And then secondly, whether we would allocate some of the funds to the Affordable Housing Trust for some of the affordable housing development, which would be consistent with one of those. I don't have a specific proposal for either, but I just wanted to put both on your radar screen to think about as we move down the road. I think they would be acceptable uses. I think there's a good reason to do it. I don't expect either of you to have a view on either, but I just wanted to raise it with you, since we can't talk about it otherwise, to expect to see a more fulsome discussion of it at a future meeting. And then the second category, as I see Bill Harvey here as well, is water. One of the categories under the ARPA that we can use it for is for water infrastructure. And obviously we have a significant filtration project that's going to be starting sometime this summer. And there's also been all of this discussion and concern about PFAS and water in different places. And so one thing I'd like to request that we'll have a meeting with the Water and Sewer Board sometime this summer to see if it might be possible to use some of these ARPA funds to add additional filtration capacity to the new treatment plant, and then what it would cost if we added additional filtration capacity to other treatment plants. Because I think it's one of these issues that will not go away.
Are you saying filtration for PFAS?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean, because we had discussed this with the Water and Sewer Board before town meeting, and Bill had indicated that the treatment plant as designed has the capacity to be expanded by essentially adding additional tanks to it. And given the fact that, one, that the bid came in low, came in pretty low for the treatment plant, and two, that we have this additional funding available, and one of the target areas for this funding is water infrastructure. I think we ought to have a discussion about that. It would probably be more cost effective if we were going to add something to that treatment plant to do it now while it's before it's built, and then get a sense of what it would cost to add to some of the other ones. Because in reading about some towns who've done it, and again, the engineering may be different, so it's not as simple as saying, well, it cost Hingham this amount, so it costs us the same, because the engineering is different. It doesn't sound like, it seems like, at least in some circumstances, it's possible to do it it wouldn't be another $9 million project, in other words.
Maybe reconstruct the tubular well field.
You beat Bill to it. So those are just a couple of notes under this area for future discussion that I wanted to raise with you. Just to think about.
Could I give just a quick off-the-cuff response to your first idea around the rent relief? I think basic idea, I think, is certainly merits consideration. The two, just off the top of my head, reactions I had was who would administer it, and what I'm getting at is it everybody that rents gets a break, or is it only the people who say they need a break that get a break? And then does that really get to the people who need the break? Because some people won't say they need help. And then the second part that's tied into that is whether I don't have a good sense of foreclosure activity. So there may be some people who own houses that have had a hard time making, and again, I'm not trying to blow this up to everybody that owns a house or rents in town, but I'm just trying to think, if we did do something like that, what can we do to make sure that it really gets to all of the people that need the help, including some who might not be as aggressive about looking for it as others.
So I think Nick's been doing some research on that.
So I would just point out the town of Norwood offered something through federal money through the CARES Act that was available to all households based on certain categories of income and certain levels of need. And all households were eligible for up to $4,000 in rental assistance, and that was administered through SMOC, so the Southern Middlesex Opportunity Council. So it didn't require a lot of town effort and involvement. So we are also in the SMOC area, so we could, that's an avenue we could try to pursue.
And currently, Medfield Outreach acts as an intake for SMOC in terms of some of the rental housing. So I think we could do it with some of the existing things we have in place. And then we left you a spreadsheet to review tonight, which includes some of the other ideas in terms of a spending plan. You've already made a commitment to do some of the downtown concerts, but you could do the $15,000 a year that we've been looking for economic development for the next 4 years, to take that off the operating budget and ensure that we keep that moving forward. We're still looking for capital budget money going forward. So as we start meeting this summer, we'll be looking for some ARPA funding for the next year of the capital budget as well. So, but just some ideas. And then we've started to, some of the department heads have started to reach out for items they may have on the capital budget or projects they've been thinking about that might be eligible for this. So we'll start keeping a master list as we come up with a spending plan. But again, this is where we need Norfolk County to give us the decision so we know how much money we actually have. It really will impact the projects that you choose.
And this goes without saying, Christine, but I will say it's the capital budget items that, if they are not currently on our capital budget,
Correct.
They are not going to be added for purposes of ARPA funding. So as we always do with our capital budget items, and we look for grant funding for items that have already identified, they should be seen as grant funding for already identified and requested capital budget items that can be paid for via this rather than through the capital budget. This is not an opportunity to add new things to the capital budget. since there's a source of funds for it. Not that anyone would consider doing such a thing. I just offer that reminder for my own edification entirely. Mostly, probably. All right. Thank you. This is very helpful as well. So more to discuss about this over the course of the summer. Next action item. We have a request to approve the sale of a bond anticipation note in the amount of $205,000 for the Mount Nebo Water Tower maintenance painting project and vote to sign the band documents. For those watching at home, a bond anticipation note is essentially a loan to the town that we receive and then pay off when we issue bonds for a particular project. Christine, for this one, I assume that this would be rolled into whatever the first bond is that we next issue, either
Correct.
for the treatment plant.
Should be with the
or-
treatment plant.
True, with the treatment plant. All right, so this is probably going to be a couple of months at most?
Yeah, we're anticipating the summer.
It's a 3-month note,
3-month note, great. And what's the interest rate?
0.75%.
7.5%. Any questions, Pete?
No.
Just maybe another comment in that you're addressing the public here is that the reason we do this, if I follow it correctly, is that it's cheap. When the town issues bonds, we want to issue a sizable bond because the cost of issuing that bond would be exorbitant if we did small bonds. So by bundling our financing needs, it's the way we save money on what it costs to do that, and that's why we do these anticipation notes. So we get the money when we need it, and then replace it with the bond when we have a package that's big enough to make it worth it.
That is correct. This money was required to be in the door by June 30th of this year, prior to us going out to market for all of the other bonds
Yeah.
packaged together.
Right, and what part of the Mount Nebo water tower are we painting this time?
The whole thing was painted, the exterior.
Oh,
and
this is
some-
the exterior.
This was some repairs to the interior as well.
Okay, were there scuba divers involved?
Yes.
All right. All right, do we have a motion?
I'd just make an observation, if we had gotten Gene Minio involved, it would be more like the old Boston gas tanks, rather than just, one color, saying there might be a way we could work some of those funds around the COVID into something, if Gene happens to be listening tonight, I'm not sure. I move that we approve sale of bond anticipation note in the amount of $205,000 for the Mount Nebo Water Tower maintenance / painting project and vote to sign the band documents.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, passes. Next one, approve a contract amendment with the Beta Group to extend the contract term from June 30th, 2021 to August 15th, 2021 for design services for the Dale Street and North Meadows Road intersection. Is this just,
Everybody's behind due to
Yeah.
COVID, so you'll see a lot of our extensions on these contracts.
okay, but they're confident they'll be done by August 15th?
Yes,
Hopeful?
hopeful,
Optimistic?
counting on.
All right, any questions, Pete?
No.
Gus?
Nope.
A motion.
I move that we approve the contract amendment with Beta Group, Inc. to extend the contract term from June 30th, 2021 to August 15th, 2021 for design services for the Dale Street and North Meadows Road intersection.
Second?
All in favor?
Yes.
Opposed? All right. This next one, request to approve the endorsement of the approval not required application for the Hinckley South incorporating the additional land authorized for disposition at the 2020 annual town meeting and authorizing me to sign the application. So this is, Christine, this is just the plan for the planning board?
This is just the plan for the planning board.
All right. Pete, I assume you're recused
I
from
will
this.
recuse myself,
All right.
yes, please.
Gus, any questions or
questions.
comment? All right, do we have a motion?
I move that we approve endorsement of the approval not required application for Hinckley South incorporating the additional land authorized for disposition at the 2021 annual town meeting and authorize Chairman Marcucci to sign the application.
Second. And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 2-0 is the vote with Pete recused. And just a note on that, with respect to this, there was a Affordable Housing Trust Board meeting on this project last week. We were unable to complete voting because a combination of technical issues and one member had to leave the meeting. We had rescheduled the meeting for Zoom for this afternoon in the hopes that the legislature would pass the authorization for that meeting to be conducted by Zoom, and they did not, so we were not able to conduct the meeting. So once we're able to post the meeting and we know what the rules are for where we can meet, we will resume to complete the vote on that proposal. But it was right at the end of the period here, and we were up until 4:15 thinking maybe we'd be able to do it, but not. Christina, the firefighters contract deferred to next time, or?
So I just want to go over real quick. So I sent a draft very late today. You had already signed the MOU. I incorporated what was in the MOU into the contract, but if you'd like to take the 2 weeks and read the full contract, that's fine. I didn't get a final sign off from the fire department until this afternoon, but we're both very happy with the integration into the contract.
Okay, I would suggest we just defer it to the next meeting.
Have one,
Sure.
one editorial
Sure.
remark, and it's both in the MOU, but it's also in the contract. It's in the contract, it's page 14, section C. And this is in the MOU, it was strike C, decay, and insert the following. It says C, members of the bargaining unit hired before July 1st, 2017, who volunteer for the training under the terms of this article by submitting a written request to the fire chief on or before October 15th, 2021. It's not a complete sentence. I don't know what it says,
Okay.
so.
I may have to go back to the bargaining table on that, but I'll get back to you.
Or give me I mean, it's an incomplete sentence. It doesn't actually say anything about what it means for the member.
The intent of it, in order to be eligible for any of the EMT reimbursement for that, they have to let the chief know by October 15th.
I read that whole section of the contract in that one sentence.
Okay.
It wasn't
I'll go back and
like,
take
I
a
was
look.
saying, well, was there maybe a predecessor before sections A, B, and C that explained what it was that made this a description of who was eligible? And there wasn't, so, but you can have.
So
Yeah,
you're
let me take
commenting
that.
on the editorials.
Yeah, it's
opposed
just
to
an
the
editorial.
substance.
There's a sentence,
Just
there's
the
a
form of
sentence in
it,
section
that's all.
C that is not a
Grammar.
complete sentence, so it doesn't actually make a point. So I don't know what it means.
All right. And we'll put that in our agenda for the 29th?
Yes.
Yeah, I didn't have a chance to look at it this afternoon. All right. Next is update regarding the Town of Medfield's Americans with Disabilities Act Self-Evaluation Transition Plan and Next Steps.
Sure, so that was provided in the packet. This was a grant-funded self-evaluation and transition plan from the state Office on Disability. The plan has been completed in terms of evaluating town facilities and recommending next steps in terms of what should be addressed and kind of the time horizon for that. So for us, we were planning to start a meeting with the ADA Access Review Committee and then work with the capital budget to start identifying those investments in town facilities that should be prioritized first. As you probably noticed in reading through it, there are some big picture questions, primarily the FAF Center, that are contingent on a few other things going on townwide. We are working on some of the trail stuff because the recommendation is to have one ADA compliant trail, and that will be the rail trail once it is complete. So there are a few big picture things. Then you may have noticed a number of smaller items throughout town buildings that are off by a couple inches here and there, signs that aren't quite right, some stuff on the town website. So there's a good chance to evaluate all of our facilities, our documentation, our town website for compliance with ADA, and lays out a real clear path on how we can start to address some of the issues that we face.
All right. Pete, any questions?
I haven't had a chance to look at this, but I'm very curious and to follow up on it, but thanks, Nick. That was a good presentation.
Same boat as Pete. I went through as much as I could on the package. That was one thing that it was like, okay, I need to
It
read
took a
this in
while.
detail, so I'll come back to it. But
All right. Thank you, Nick. All right, consent agenda. First, authorize me to sign the emergency declaration rescission. The Medfield Lions request a one-day beer wine permit for their end-of-year meeting at the First Parish Church on June 16th. There is a request for a block party and road closure in the Hillcrest Road cul-de-sac on June 26th from 4 p.m. to 9 p.m. The Gazebo Players request use of Medfield State Hospital on July 24th and 25th for Shakespeare in Shorts, as well as permission to place a sandwich board at North Street, Route 109 for 2 weeks. And we vote to sign the Certificate of Achievement for Natalie Ann Haygood for earning the Girl Scout Gold Award and serving our community. Any questions, comments on the consent agenda?
I just think it's ironic to have this emergency declaration rescission along with these other things it just seems incongruous, that's all.
I had the same reaction. It's sort of not with a bang but a whimper, right? We're
Well,
we're rescinding the
it.
emergency declaration in the consent
Not
agenda.
clear
you know,
that it ever
kind of
accomplished anything anyway, so.
You already voted to rescind it. This
I
is
know.
just signing the actual
the-
agreement.
I know.
It's a very different sort of
Yeah.
topic
We could,
from the rest.
we could make this more official. Don't pull your back out.
And I'll just note that it's great to see a gold award being awarded. Great to see a gold award being awarded. I think it's been a few years since we've had one, so I think that's really terrific. And congratulations to Natalie on that honor. So do we have a motion to approve the items in the consent agenda? Excuse me.
I move that we approve the items on the consent agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Yep.
Opposed? No, they pass. All right, we have meeting minutes to approve from May 12th, 2020, July 28th, 2020, September 1st, 2020, January 5th, 2021, January 19th, 2021, February 2nd, 2021, and March 9th, 2021. Any comments, questions on the minutes?
One of us didn't review them, so could we postpone?
Who didn't review them?
Really need to, really need to get them approved.
Yeah.
And Christine, I don't know if you sent me, but the one I didn't immediately find was September 1st, 2020.
You and I talked about it last week, so I think it was in a separate email that went by itself.
Separate email.
Yeah. You and I had talked
So
about
was
it.
May 12th. So if so does that mean I've already reviewed it, given you my
I think you've
comments?
reviewed it and given me
All
your
right,
comments, so I
that's all I
think you're
need to
good.
know.
All right. So Pete, can you review these for the next one?
Yes.
All right.
Okay.
And we'll probably have more for next week as well, for the next time as well. Town administrator updates.
I have a couple of things. In front of you, there's a letter from Fred Davis and Hinckley from the Medfield Energy Committee, and they are inviting you to attend and participate in upcoming June 17th meeting, where they'll be discussing public outreach for the Medfield Climate Action Plan Work Group. So all the details are in the letter in front of you.
All right.
I am sad and happy and offer my congratulations to Sergeant John Geary, who has announced his retirement from the Medfield Police Department. After 32 and a half years of policing, 26 of which were in Medfield. So we wish him all the good things in his retirement. So
Absolutely.
he came in today wondering what he could do. So we have some ideas.
When is his official last day?
Next Thursday.
Wow.
Just a reminder, Coolidge Corner Theater will be at Medfield State Hospital on Friday and Saturday night for a showing of Shutter Island, and I heard late this afternoon that both shows have been sold out.
Wow, that's great.
It's great.
This weekend, you said?
This weekend.
This weekend. Terrific. That's great.
She'll probably kill me, but I want to congratulate Georgia Clevis on her 30th work anniversary with the town of Medfield, which happens on Thursday.
Congratulations to Georgia. She's not at the meeting any longer, Christine.
No, I know. I was hoping she would stay for a few more minutes. We're going to extend the timeline for letters of interest on the Board of Selectmen Name Change Committee. We only received 3 to date. I believe they were due June 10th. So we're going to extend that for a couple of weeks and try and get some more interest in that. Let's see.
We have some other potential committee openings coming this summer as well, right?
Yes, and we've posted some on the website already, and we'll start publicizing those as well. And we did receive some interest letters that have come in already. So.
All right, great.
And at the June 29th meeting, we'll review the committee appointment policy so we can get that in place before we actually start appointing everybody again.
Great.
This Saturday, the governor last July signed Juneteenth into a state holiday, which is this Saturday. In trying to determine what we're going to do in terms of celebrating and observing the holiday in Medfield, the transfer station, in working with Mo, the transfer station will be open on Saturday. And our employees will be provided with holiday pay to work that. The library will be closed since the holiday is that Saturday. And then going forward, the holiday will be Sunday next year, which would mean a holiday for town employees on the Monday, so we'll deal with that in calendar year 22 with both the unions and the non-union employees. Any addition to the personnel policy in terms of holidays has to be approved by town meeting. So we'll be looking to address that and whether or not that needs to continue at town meeting this year as well.
Okay.
And that's all I have.
All right. Selectmen reports. Well, next meeting, I guess we'll do selectmen reports, then we'll do next meeting date. Selectmen reports, Pete.
I would just start by saying that a long time ago, I went to an anniversary party for my Deb's sister, Sue Perry, who started working for the Westwood Pool when she was probably 14. So she had her 25th anniversary very early in her Westwood career. And Westwood did it in a very nice way. And it was, the supervisor made some sort of big deal out of Sue at that event. It was held at the the Council on Aging building, which was a nice building over there. And I think that might be a nice thing to institutionalize. I mean, you mentioned Georgia having a 30-year anniversary. It's just, I think it's worth making a little bit of a deal about those sorts of anniversaries. So I think that's worth doing. The Energy Committee met, and I'll just run down. They're doing so much work. They talked about I guess they had a meeting with you, Chris. They're talking about the sustainability coordinator position that's coming in on the new budget year. Alex Stevens is following up on the green communities things that Amy Colleran's putting into effect with regard to the HVAC at the different buildings, the controls. I'm learning more about controls for HVAC and lighting at the hospital, at the high school and the middle school. And one of the problems is that when the schools were redone in 2001, the controls were so complicated that none of the people were at the school knew how to run them. And so we found, well, that was one of the things the Energy Committee found out when it started work. Let's see, Carbon Reduction Planning Group, that's the thing, I guess, that we've been invited to. Solar work group is moving forward. There's a transportation group, Medfield Action, Environmental Action and Sustainability Medfield is providing a place for people to come together and talk. They're following up with the Dale Street Net Zero School. They covered the townwide master planning and the sustainability elements that are targeted for the Energy Committee. Liaison with other groups like MCAM, MAPC, Eversource, and then there's warrant articles. They talked about the annual town meeting, and then the state hospital. They've got fingers in a lot of pots. The Midfield Foundation had its June meeting, which is where new officers are elected. It was June 6th, and June 6th was declared by the Select Board to be Evan Weisenfeld Day in honor of Evan, who retired after 10 years as the president of the Medfield Foundation. Evan seemed to be pleased with his Evan Weisenfeld Day. He got his certificate at 6 o'clock, and he was upset because he had not known about it until late in the day. And then the last thing was the rolling rally, and I got to see that up close because I was lining the cars up at the DPW garage, and it was really fun to see how much interest and excitement the kids and their families were having. It is just clearly a very fun event for the families and the kids that are graduating. So it's clearly, I think that's going to stay as a permanent thing in the future. And that's it, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Gus?
Two things. I attended the high school graduation on Sunday afternoon. It was a nice, I learned a few things there. It was a nice graduation. It was nice to see a regular graduation, so that's the first point. There was a good crowd. This was still socially distanced, so interestingly, the configuration of the chairs was not what we'd normally have. And they said that there were 1,000 people there, so if we should ever have a really contentious outdoor town meeting, we can more or less double the capacity of what we did for our last town meeting, and it works just fine. I guess I'm just out of touch, but one of the things I found out, I hadn't appreciated that the seniors were able to have a senior prom. They were able to have a senior cruise. So there was the rolling rally. So it may not have been quite like a normal senior year, but I actually felt a lot happier for them having gone to the graduation and learned all these things. And I even understood that the juniors, I think, are having a junior prom this year. So if some of us are slow at coming out of the COVID restrictions, some of us are not. And it's the right ones that are not. So I was glad to see that. The other thing, I went to the artist reception at the State Hospital on Monday night. There was a decent, nice crowd there. Artist was there, and he explained. Two things were impressive. One is when someone from out of the town who doesn't know very much about your town is asked to do something as big as that at a place that's as important as that. I was impressed with the effort that he had put into understanding the background of the hospital, the background of the town, some of the town values, and then as he was explaining what he had done with the picture itself, the creation itself, it was a very thoughtful, meaningful connection to both history, but also the town. You know, the violinist there actually is somebody at the high school. So it just is it was a really nice night, very nice. The whole thing was just very good. So I like that. And then the other thing we learned is that a lot of that art is spray. He's using spray paint. So it's just impressive. Some of the things in terms of how he used the building, and the fact that he was doing that. I guess they use rollers for some of the major, broad expanses that are single color, but the actual art is done with spray paint, and it was pretty good.
I asked what his background was. He was apparently a graffiti artist, which is perfect.
Yeah, and that's the thing. You think of spray paint, you think of graffiti, and then every once in a while you see graffiti. It's go, that's pretty good graffiti.
Oh yeah.
But then that's is different. This is like, no, this is the same medium, but the skill level is really it's impressive. This is.
Yeah, no, it's a beautiful mural.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful mural. Anything else?
That's it.
A couple of things. I was at the rolling rally as well at the other end of the route from Pete, but it was a great day. It was a beautiful day. I think it also was pretty efficient. I think it was probably only there about 30 or 35 minutes. That traffic was tied up I was at the corner of North Street and 109, and it moved right through. And I think everybody I spoke to who was in the rally just thought it was amazing and incredible, meaningful experience for them. And so that was really great to see. A beautiful day for it. I already reported on our Affordable Housing Trust Board meeting with respect to the Hinckley South project. The other thing that we're working on, and we authorized Sarah to begin preparing, is an RFP that we will see sometime this summer to issue. I think it will have to be issued by us. And the goal of the RFP is we have this $1 million of bonding authority that we haven't used at all in support of the affordable housing efforts. And the RFP is going to be a little different than the usual in that essentially we're going to be offering an RFP to purchase a affordability deed restriction to be able to make an investment in the conversion of an existing building into an affordable building. So the model are the two projects at 67 and 71 North Street. We had hoped that the success of those buildings might spur some additional interest. That it hasn't happened yet. So we're going to see if offering some additional funds to contribute to that type of a reuse and a redevelopment of, there wouldn't have to be a house, it could be an existing building that's not being used, into a similar 8-unit type apartment building presumably in the downtown area. That's where most buildings that would be appropriate for that kind of conversion would be there. And I think Sarah's got some ideas on how to put it together, and we'll put together the draft RFP for a discussion. But looking ahead to what the next couple of projects will be, I think there's an opportunity there for a couple of those modest type conversions that would, if we got some people interested, and there definitely are some candidates of buildings, and perhaps people who haven't thought of a building they own as a candidate for that type of conversion might be prompted to do so if they weren't footing the entire bill for the conversion. So you can expect to see that coming down the road. And on Sunday, I attended, along with the other members of the school building committee, a community forum, which was held in the Dale Street cafeteria. Lasted about 3 hours. It was a hybrid meeting, both in person and on Zoom. I don't know how many people attended via Zoom, but there was a good turnout and a robust discussion with people who were there in person. It was good to have a meeting like that in person, and it wasn't as hot in the Dale Street cafeteria as I expected it to be at 4 o'clock on Sunday. So that was.
It was a little hard on Zoom because the speakers didn't introduce themselves, and so you didn't know who was asking questions a lot of times, which was that just made it a little hard.
Yeah. Okay. I get that. That's true. I guess we're a little out of practice with the. We're used to typing in who you are without announcing who you are in person. It went about 3 hours, and I thought it was
a good presentation.
Yeah, I thought it was a good forum, and good to see people that I've not seen in person for a year and a half in some cases. So that was good. Anything else?
I just had, one other thing occurred to me, which was that we got an open meeting, a public records request, and I spent an hour and a half on Friday night collecting emails that I had received from residents in town related to the Dale Street project to satisfy the public records request. And so now I've learned, because like I said, we did this once before for the same person, and I've now learned that I'm going to segregate all the emails about the Dale Street School into a new category in my case management software, so it won't take me an hour and a half the next time I get a public records request.
Well, we'll see if I can beat that hour and a half. I haven't started on that project. Although I think this probably reinforces, Christine, maybe one of the town goals is getting us town of Medfield email accounts so that some of this could be delegated if possible.
We are ready to go July 1st.
Okay.
Another email to have to look at, huh?
Yeah, I mean, I do have a separate email
Better
account.
yet, have people
Yeah.
call you on
Yeah.
a phone, and then there's nothing you have to worry about.
Yeah.
We did have select board telephone numbers at one point, and that was just, it was another number to check for messages for me. And my message to people on it was, please call me at my office.
You probably would then have to produce a record of at least the calls, so
Yeah,
you can't win.
all right. Anything further, or we'll take a motion to adjourn?
I move that we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you, everybody. We will see you in 2 weeks. And my challenge to the town is to double our in-person attendance.
We really should show the audience. If Medfield TV could show our audience, that would be perfect.
That's not fair.
We have one attendee.
Don't do that to her.
This one, if you wanted that. They're,
I don't know who they are. I haven't run across them. Where are they from?
South Coast,
Somebody's doing the due diligence right now?
already done.
Okay.